I'm going to go from one great guest to another. We are joined by Hamza Salam. Hamza Salam, my mouse is just being weird. I'm sorry. He is a Pakistani journalist. He is founder and editor of Pakistan Daily and a former reporter for Pakistan's The News International. Hamza, man, welcome to the show. How you doing today? You doing
For
okay?
having me. Yes, I'm fine. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. This has been a dramatic night. I'll tell you that. I watched warplanes from India hit Pakistan or areas of Pakistan. I watched Pakistan respond, blowing up seemingly some kind of Indian military facility. I'm trying to pull this up for the audience so they can see it for themselves. Apparently, Indian fighters were either shot down or crashed. I'm not entirely sure which. I'm seeing reports coming out for both. To put it mildly, these two nuclear powers have now exchanged heavy fire. What is the Pakistani argument in this? And what are they saying from their point of view? I know Pakistan went to the UN Security Council to try to get the UN Security Council to effectively, I guess, intervene in some way. They didn't really intervene. I know Russia and China were talking about being diplomats and trying to prevent this from taking place. Modi had already given license to his military to go after the people who were responsible for the attack in Kashmir. Now, I would imagine the Indian government is saying we are attacking targets that was related in some way to the attack and the murder of the 26 Indian citizens, Hindus, on our territory. Give me, what is the Pakistani take for this?
Well, last night's attack by India was unprovoked and unjustified. India targeted multiple civilian areas, so India did not target military installations. Uh, Over 30 people have died in Pakistan so far, with dozens injured. And Pakistan sees this as an act of war. Now, in retaliation to this provocation, the Pakistani Air Force shot down five Indian fighter jets, including three Rafale jets. The debris has been found and it has also been acknowledged by the Indian media. So it's a very precarious situation overall. Now, just a few minutes earlier, Pakistan's National Security Committee also held a meeting in which they decided to give a befitting response to India. So currently, the aerial dogfight was just the retaliation to this attack, but the main response by Pakistan is yet to be seen. But since these are two nuclear powers, the world is calling on both nations to exercise restraint. And I think the onus is now on India to make any de escalating measures, because so far they have initiated a war and it remains unclear on how things will unfold. But I do think with reasonable certainty it can be predicted that Pakistan will respond.
Wow. As you point out, there was, I guess, exchange of fire. India hit various targets. Pakistan responded. Pakistan comes out saying, okay, we can stop here if you want to stop here, if that's what you want to do. India is not going to accept that these were civilian targets. What India is going to say is we were going after terrorist targets that we believe were related in some way. And if there were civilians in an area, we understand. But ultimately, what we were trying to hit were terrorists that were responsible for the killing of the Indian citizens. What do you say to that? I mean, do you take that as being a rational take that, yeah, we went after people, fair enough. There were civilians, we understand, but ultimately we were going after the people who were responsible in some way? Because I don't think India is looking at this from the perspective of we were attacking the Pakistani government. They're looking at it, we were attacking targets not related to Pakistani military installations, but to terrorist affiliations. Give me a take on that.
Well, so far, India has not provided a shred of evidence of Pakistani involvement in Pahalgam or in any other incident which they may claim is an excuse for their aggression. Now, even these locations, India has not shared any evidence with the international community or their own media, which suggests that these places were terrorist camps. It seems like a fiction created just to justify this provocation. But even if, for argument's sake, let's agree that yes, there might be some terrorist targets in those locations. International law does not allow any nation to attack any other sovereign nation inside their own territory. Now, if we reverse the situation, could Pakistan do the same? What if Pakistan says that there are terrorist camps in India and attacks in the heart of New Delhi or Mumbai or Goa or in other targets? How would that situation be? The world may not perhaps agree to such a unilateral and such an aggressive action, but now that India has opened this door for aggression, I think it is only natural and understandable that Pakistan's response will be proportionate. Now, Pakistan's Strategic Plans Division has a policy of quid pro quo plus, which means that any aggression will be responded slightly more than what the aggression has happened by India. So now I think it is plausible, at least, that Pakistan will also target Indian cities, perhaps using the same rhetoric India is using, and justify their own military operations inside Indian territory.
Now, you are going to find this slightly comical in regard, because look, I agree with you on the military and the way that they speak about attacks, because they always put it through their frame of reference. And they would say these were precision, targeted, non-escalatory. And it's like, okay, dude, you're even if you feel justified in the attack, the idea that it's not escalatory is nonsense, right? But their point is right here. It says Operation Sindoor, which is what they're calling it. It said the targets. Well, I'm not going to go for the cities, but the Ministry of Defense emphasized that the operations were, quote, focused, measured, and non-escalatory, deliberately avoiding Pakistan military installations to prevent further escalation. Quote, our actions have a focused, measured, non-escalatory nature. No Pakistani military facilities have been hit. India has demonstrated considerable restraint in the selection of targets and methods of execution. Said this was an official statement from the Ministry of Defense. What do you say to that? That from their point of view, look, we didn't hit any Pakistani military installations. So because we didn't hit anything associated with Pakistani military, then this should be, I guess, okay, I guess in their minds. I don't know any state that would accept that, but fair enough. What is your take on that? I mean, their thing is we weren't going after Pakistan proper. We were going after terrorist elements in Pakistan. Let me ask you this. Do you accept that there are elements, that there are terrorist elements that are in various locations in Pakistan, and that those elements may have been associated with or responsible for the attack? And from India's point of view, we're not necessarily associating this with the Pakistani government, which is the reason why we didn't attack Pakistani military installations. We were going after terrorist elements in Pakistan that we believe were responsible for it. And so Pakistan is not being attacked in the proper sense of the word of the Pakistani government, but terrorist elements in Pakistan are. And the reason why I ask this, the US will make the same argument in Afghanistan. And look, I don't accept this argument in the US case, but they would say, we are hitting terrorist elements that are in these various regions that is doing X and Y. Now, the problem with the US is 70 to 80% of those people are civilians. But put that aside for the moment. We make a very similar premise when we are going for attacks in various regions, even in Pakistan, if I'm not mistaken. Do you accept that there are terrorist elements in Pakistan that the Pakistani government doesn't necessarily have control, or the very least Pakistani government is saying we had no control over this? So, okay. So the Pakistani government doesn't have control over those terrorist elements, and that the Indian airstrike wasn't going after Pakistan proper. It was going after those terrorist elements that the Pakistani government says that they don't have control of. And look, you still may say that's still unacceptable. You're still going after Pakistani territory, and you haven't shown any evidence that this is coming from us. But give me your take on that argument, because that is their argument.
Well, I think this entire argument is based on a false premise. If it were true, or if it had a shred of truth in it, evidence would have been shared with the international community, with India's own media, but this has not been the case so far. So far, what we have seen is that India has targeted Pakistani civilians. Our newsroom at the Pakistan Daily has seen pictures of dead bodies of women, of young children. They have been identified. Their funerals are currently ongoing. So I think the premise New Delhi is trying to build is totally based on a false narrative, crafted to pacify their own domestic audience and their own domestic aims. But this is a very dangerous game New Delhi is playing, because now things are moving upwards in the escalation ladder, and
Yeah.
Islamabad will respond at a place and time of its own choosing. So earlier, Pakistan's defense minister also said that if Pakistani civilians aren't safe, then Indian civilians won't be safe either. If India feels that there are terror camps in Pakistan, which the Pakistani government has no control of, then the Pakistani government could also claim that there are terror camps in India, which New Delhi has no control of. So, tit for tat responses could be the norm. The situation could further escalate. And right now, what we're seeing is that New Delhi has emerged as the aggressor in this regard. The international community is also, by and large, calling India out for this, unilateral act of aggression. Even the United States, the EU, other Western countries are calling for both sides to exercise restraint. But the feeling in Islamabad and in entire Pakistan is that of not of mourning, but of anger.
Yeah.
And this national anger will now translate into a befitting response. Already, we have seen Pakistan's Air Force exert its aerial supremacy in the skies of South Asia. And Pakistani forces have downed over five Indian aircraft. But still, it seems that this response is still not proportionate unless Pakistan targets India inside their own territory, just like New Delhi did. I think this situation cannot be normalized. Diplomatic channels cannot succeed unless there is equality in the escalation ladder, unless New Delhi acknowledges its aggression against Pakistan, and unless the Pakistani people also believe that it is time to, call for peace, because right now war bells are ringing in both capitals.
Do you in Pakistan in general believe that Israel carried out a false flag and murdered 26 of its own civilians? Because I'm trying to
Well,
understand. I got to be honest with you. I am not overtly familiar with with Pakistan and
India.
Indian politics. And so when I'm asking these questions, if they're stupid questions, forgive me. It's me trying to set up a context to understand it. 26 Indian civilians were murdered. And I guess the catch becomes, A, why did that murder take place? And was there some relationship with Pakistan in regards to the killing of these civilians? And I guess my question is, why would they set up a pretext by which to attack Pakistan? Like, what would be their rationale for it? What would be their motivation to do that and to initiate a war on some pretext of these civilians being killed if they weren't angered by these civilians being killed?
Well, okay, let me answer the first question first. That whether this is a false flag attack or not, frankly, I do not have enough information to answer this question. It could
Fair
be a
enough.
false flag attack. It could be something else. So far, both sides don't have enough evidence to say something very substantive. But what we do know is that India has provided no evidence of Pakistani involvement. So far, with the information we have, at the 7th of May, while we are talking, there is zero, literally zero evidence of Pakistani involvement in this attack. Now, there are certain questions I myself have which perhaps hint towards this incident being a false flag. My primary question is, why have these attackers not been arrested by now? How have they remained hidden in Indian occupied Kashmir when there are literally hundreds of thousands of Indian soldiers in that region? Is that a security failure, or is it something more sinister? And about the motivations of India to do something like this and to initiate a war with Pakistan, I think India has a lot of motivation to do something like this. And in South Asia and in the entire world, we see states sometimes behaving in a very weird way in order to achieve their political and diplomatic and military goals. So what we saw immediately after this attack, like minutes after the attack, we saw India blame Pakistan when enough information was not even there about how many people had died, who were involved. It's literally impossible to point blame on any party in a few minutes of such a big terrorist attack. So I think this needs to be considered by the international community on how India conducted the investigation of this attack. But in regards to India's motivations, so what India's first reaction to this attack was suspending the Indus Water Treaty. Now, this
Right.
Indus Water Treaty was brokered by the World Bank. It created a water sharing mechanism by both countries because there are certain rivers which are shared between these two neighbors. So India wanted to opt out of this. Now, I think it could have been foreseen that if India suspends the Indus Water Treaty, Pakistan would suspend the Shimla Agreement, which holds the current line of control in Kashmir, which divides this conflicted region between both countries. So India could perhaps wanted a hot border, perhaps they wanted more military gains, perhaps they felt that their military was well equipped to deliver military geographical gains. So this could be a very strong motivation. And other motivation could be that India was having provincial elections in Bihar. So in order to capitalize on a stronger domestic political sentiment, in order for the BJP, the Indian ruling party, to gain political capital, I think such a scandal, serves them well. And right now, there's a very patriotic sentiment in both countries, and the ruling governments and the ruling parties do have extended political capital. Now, Pakistan is not having any elections, or Pakistan doesn't have a need for such kind of public perception manipulation. But India could very well do something like this in order to, manipulate the views of their own audiences. And these things have happened before, even in the Pulwama attack, when India blamed Pakistan and there was an aerial dogfight between these both nations. It happened just a few weeks before Prime Minister Modi's general election. So there is a
Mhm.
pattern, there is a history what Pakistan has called for. And I think the entire global community, by and large, is backing this demand of an independent investigation of how the Pahalgam attack was conducted. Why is New Delhi so against an independent investigation into this attack? These are some of the actions which raise suspicions of a false flag operation.
No, I agree with you. There should be an independent investigation, 1,000%. I will tell you the governments do, they have a hyper aggressive response when their own citizens have killed. I can tell you if that was the US, oh my God, the response by the US would, they would not wait for the investigation to come to the conclusion. So fair enough, agreed. It is a it is a heavy burden for me to get to the assessment that they would murder 26 of their own. The US's plans like that, the CIA, for example, had a plan of killing civilians, simulated or real, in order to blame the Cuban government to provoke a war. So again, my context is America, which gives me a very dark context for some of the stuff. It's just a heavy edge. I would tell you that people I've also interviewed will point out and say, well, Pakistan has various divisions. And in order to bring the country together, they may be willing to do something like this with the notion of provoking a conflict, with the idea that within the context of that conflict, the country would rally behind the government, a government that is in crisis, with Imran Khan being prosecuted, with various factions in various parts of Pakistan that seems to be at war with the government. Meaning, they would also come away with an assessment that, okay, well, Pakistan needed this also. And again, this is not me criticizing. This is not me taking a side. This is me asking questions. I don't have a dog in this hunt. I'm on the moon looking at this, and I'm trying to understand it from both sides. Just figure out to get more context on it, if that makes sense. So my questions aren't in an indictment. The questions are just honest questions. Where does this go? Let me ask that. If indeed Islamabad is like, we need a balance, and that balance means we need to also attack into India. India is not going to accept that, and they're going to respond in kind. So are we just moving up the escalatory ladder, or do you think the skirmish is enough where both sides can come together and say, okay, We both got our licks in. We're putting this to bed, or you don't see this ending anytime soon. You see this continuing to escalate.
Well, so far, because just minutes ago we saw Pakistan's National Security Committee hold an emergency meeting in which they did decide to respond to this Indian aggression. The Prime Minister of Pakistan and the cabinet have authorized the armed forces to conduct any operation as and when they deem fit. And Pakistan's military spokesman, the Director General of the Inter Services Public Relations, Lieutenant General Ahmed Sharif Chaudhry, has also made it clear that Pakistan will respond at a time and place of its choosing. And I think when sovereignty is involved, when national pride is involved, when national unity is involved, Pakistan and Pakistanis will not compromise. And New
Mhm.
Delhi and the entire world should not be misunderstood about Pakistan's intentions. I think each and every Pakistani citizen vows to defend their motherland. And after such a horrendous attack on Pakistani civilians, I think that the national sentiment is that there needs to be an appropriate response, because if there is not, then such a situation could happen again, and Pakistan's silence or yearning for peace could be considered as a weakness. And I think Islamabad cannot let that happen in these circumstances. And yes, if things rise in the escalatory ladder, I think it perhaps serves Islamabad, because it may be argued that Islamabad has much less to lose than New Delhi. Islamabad represents a much smaller economy, a much smaller population, and to be honest, geopolitically, New Delhi does pull more weight. So, if this escalates further, it's only India's loss, because Pakistan is already a conflict ridden country. We have tensions with Afghanistan. We don't have an ideal relationship with Iran. So, even if we share a hot border with India and there's a prolonged conflict, but the Pakistani forces are battle hardened. India has not had a major war since a long time.
In
Even
1921.
recently, last night, we have seen how the Pakistani Air Force completely dominated the skies and downed multiple Indian jets. So I do think that the situation will escalate. And in regards to your earlier comment that, yes, you're right, if we are claiming that India may conduct a false flag, then yes, it always serves us if we look at the opposite side, that what if Pakistan did it for its own domestic political maneuvering or capital? Yes, that is a possibility. But in any analysis or in any hypothesis, I think what is most important is the evidence. So if there is any evidence of Pakistani involvement, I think that yes, international law should take its course, and any actor which supports terror should be held accountable. There can be no justification for terrorism in any context, but it should be impartial, it should be independent, and it should be acknowledged by both parties. But such unilateral actions signify bullying. And one thing, as a Pakistani, I can tell you, I'm a journalist, I'm reporting on this conflict, but the Pakistani nation will not be bullied. We are just not like that. We're a martial race, and we would prefer to die rather than to live with indignity. These are the sentiments of the Pakistani nation, and we are completely confident that our armed forces will represent our sentiments.
One last question before I let you go, and I appreciate you coming on. I really do, especially at the short time frame. Um, do you think that JD Vance being in India had anything to do with the timing of this? That seems like a hell of a coincidence that he's in India and then this takes place like a day later.
Well, in these things, when I analyze such actions, I think there are no coincidences, and things can't just be too good to be true, or without a reason. So,
Mhm.
still, I don't say that correlation means causation. So
Yes.
it could just be a random occurrence, but the way New Delhi has dealt with this entire situation, the way they have been unable to capture the attackers, the way they are trying to stall an independent investigation, the way they took minutes to blame Pakistan, and the fact that the vice president of the United States was there. I think all of these circumstances just create a confusion or a doubt that what really transpired that fateful night in Pahalgam, and why hasn't India or the global community been able to find out the truth so far? It's been many days since it happened. If there was a national will represented by New Delhi, I have no doubt that these attackers would have been caught and held accountable. But what we have seen is that the attackers have not been caught and not been punished, but another country, which right now has nothing to do with this or has no evidence of their involvement, they have been attacked. So this perhaps leans towards a sinister motive, which Islamabad is also exploring.
Mhm. Dramatic, to put it mildly. Hazma Salam, thank you for this, man. I really do appreciate it, especially on short notice. Hazma Salam, he is a Pakistani journalist. He is founder and editor for Pakistan Daily and former reporter for Pakistan's News International. You be safe, man. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.
Be safe. Bye bye. All right. Fascinating events, to put it